Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Risk Control and Education. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rodgers, and today we're discussing fidelity practices for emergency service organizations. Joining me on the program today is Blair Tyndall, and Blair is an industry specialist in the VFIS Risk Control and Education Department. Blair is joining us today to discuss some best practices regarding fidelity procedures and asset management. Blair, I want to thank you for joining me on the program, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me back, Chris. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. So let's start off with explaining to the audience what fidelity risks are.
Well, fidelity risks fall into a couple of different categories, Chris. We're talking about asset management, which is your financial management for the actual operation of your emergency services organization. We can also talk about fundraising events, special events, those kinds of things that the department is involved in on maybe an annual basis. And then we can also talk about not a new risk, but a risk that's much more prevalent today, and that's computer software, cyber attacks, and those kinds of things.
So before we get into those topics that you just mentioned, what are some ways that we can reduce fidelity exposures in our organizations?
Well, we'll kind of take it from the top. One of the first ways you can reduce fidelity exposures is every organization, whether they be a career organization, volunteer organization, private nonprofit, or for-profit, everyone has officers, administrators, more than likely a board of directors or some elected officials. Those people are ultimately responsible for many of the things that we're talking about today. So one of the first ways to reduce that is to do complete background checks on these individuals once they are placed in office, or possibly, if you want to be more aggressive, to do background checks on them before they're even elected to the office, maybe during the nomination process. And that way, you can know if there's any background problems with these individuals as far as handling money, or if there's anything in their past that you may need to be aware of before they fill those positions and have those positions of authority over these financial assets or these fidelity concerns.
So let's talk about some things that go on in a station, or an organization on a day-to-day basis. We're buying materials, we're buying things to make the organization go. So can you go into how fidelity practices apply to purchasing, fund management, check writing, things of that nature?
Sure, Chris. I mean, obviously, everyone has, a varied level of purchasing. So, we're talking about purchasing a new engine or a new ambulance. Then, obviously, those are very large purchases. And then you've got daily operations too, where you're doing station supplies. You're purchasing smaller portable equipment. You could even have a payroll piece as well, where you're paying employees or paying part-time people or even volunteers. So things that we recommend, having 2 signatures on every check, only after it's written in full, never having a blank check, never using like signature stamps and that kind of stuff to make things easy. Then at least 2 people have to look at it. Have signature cards on file at your financial institutions. Update them at least annually or anytime there's a change. Have an individual reconciling your bank statements that does not have check writing authority. So that gives a third set of eyes to look at that check. We also always recommend audits at least annually by a third party, somebody that's independent of the fire department or even independent of the county or the particularly government organization that you're a part of. Do not permit people, and this one gets a little tough in our very rural fire departments and EMS agencies, but it is a good practice not permitting people with close family ties from being involved in this process that we just described. So husband, wife, siblings, any kind of partnership that would be in a domestic family like that, we kind of recommend that those people don't be in those positions as well. And then have these policies that you have documented and have them in place. so that if an outside person in your community, a taxpayer or a local news station or somebody comes by and says, "Hey, how do you handle these financial decisions?" you can explain those policies to them and actually hand them a written copy of it, so it's all documented.
So let's move on to things that, don't happen on a day-to-day basis. We have organizations that have special events. We also have organizations that do fundraising activities. So those obviously collect funds. So how does Fidelity practices revolve around that?
Yeah, this is another area of risk that's usually most departments have a couple of times per year. Some may be more active. They may have a weekly bingo, or they may have a social hall or an event hall that they rent out. But fundraising and special events brings in a couple of things. A lot of people coming into your department that you're not familiar with from the outside that are public members. And a lot of times we use cash for these events, for like dinner plates, fish fries and potluck dinners and those kinds of things. A lot of cash is changing hands. So if cash is changing hands, we always want a third party present whenever we're handling cash. This would go back to what I said earlier about making those different individuals not have close family ties, so you can have a real check and balance system in place. Use video recording at cash stations anytime that you can. And then whenever possible, use some kind of, ticket trail or some kind of paper trail. So, for example, we sold 500 tickets to our benefit dinner tonight, and, those 500 tickets equal this amount of money, and have those things reconciled. And then we always encourage the departments to minimize the amount of cash they have on hand. What I mean by that is, if it's possible to reconcile the monies that were received and do an immediate deposit, day of or immediately after the event, then we recommend that they do that and get that cash off of property, put it into a secure financial institution. If that cannot be done, then we recommend that the department uses a fireproof safe, and it's deposited as soon as possible, again with those same individuals handling that cash. And the other thing that we kind of recommend as well is having maybe a third party law enforcement officer with you while you're transporting that cash to be deposited.
So let's go into the final area that you talked about in your opening comments. Cybersecurity, cyber risk are a big issue that just get bigger every day. Can you talk about how we apply Fidelity procedures to help control those exposures?
Sure, Chris. And I do want to back up, but it's kind of related to what we're talking about now on the computer. There's using technology is something that none of us can escape, and it really makes things better. So backing up to our special events, one thing that I failed to mention earlier, and I'm glad you brought that back up, is that today we have the ability to use QR codes to exchange cash. We can do cash apps such as Venmo, PayPal, PayMe. Those kinds of apps can be used at these fundraising events too. And if that's a possibility, it certainly removes that risk as well. But when we delve into the technology world, which all of us are in now, we have to remember that those kind of attacks, cybersecurity attacks, are usually involving a financial risk. So they're looking for money, they're looking for a way to gain money or to make you pay money to unlock your computer or to free it from jail or unghost it or whatever the word is that they use, right? So we should only be doing financial practices on hardware and software that's owned and operated by the department. So try to stay away from someone taking those kind of books, QuickBooks or Microsoft Excel or any of those financial programs and putting on a personal computer, because that increases your risk for someone hacking into that system. Also, the obvious things, using antivirus software, having a departmental email like, treasurer at abcfiredepartment.com or secretary at abcfiredepartment.com versus having Blair Tyndall at abcfiredepartment.com, right? Because that gives another level of security if somebody decides to try to hack into it. Password protect everything, just like we always have. And it may be a good idea to use a third-party software or computer company to help you with those particular risks, because they're going to be more familiar with securing servers, using the proper laptops, using the proper standalone desktop models, and what the actual security is there. And then, as always, we're all guilty of this: backing up data, having multiple copies of data, and having data in different places so that these different people can not only view it from a Fidelity standpoint, but they can also have a second copy of it. So that's some of the things that we have seen that give some of these departments problems in the Fidelity world.
And we definitely want to make sure anything that we purchase make a purchase on is on a protected network, not using the Wi-Fi at the airport or in the middle of the city or something like that, because there's plenty of people that have the skills to take some of your personal information or financial tools and use it for nefarious means.
Absolutely, and that's a great point, Chris. I mean, it's no different than our personal accounts. So once someone logs into or hacks into ABC EMS account, or ABC Fire Department account, then they can have access to your entire budget, or your entire checking, your entire savings, CDs, whatever the department does with their finances, they can have full access to that, and that's public funds that we're losing. And the most critical thing is if that happens, we may not be able to provide the service that the citizens need if we're in a financial crisis.
So Blair, the one last question that we typically like to ask: are there any resources or materials that VFIS has that could help listeners out in this area?
Yes, if you'll go to our website, Chris, VFIS.com or responderhelp.com, and look for Fidelity Risk Bulletin, that's the title of it, just one word. And there's a lot of additional resources on there. This stuff is in writing for everybody to see. Different states have different requirements as well, so you can pull those individual states there. And of course, always give us a call if we can help.
Perfect. Well, Blair, it was a pleasure to have you back on the program. It's always a joy to talk to you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guest, Blair Tyndall, once again for his time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by emailing VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees.